You know, there's that expression that people say all the time, don't meet your heroes. And this man is like the affirmation of what a lie that is, you know, because there are people who not only live up to your dream of who they might be, but exceed expectation. And I knew that whoever was going to be in this role, that I wanted it to be someone who could make me better and who I would want to come to work every day wanting to like live up to the opportunity. So I'm so grateful that you said yes. And don't be afraid to meet your heroes.
The stars and executive producers of UnPrisoned, Kerry Washington and Delroy Lindo. How are you guys? Are you comfortable?
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on the show, Hulu's biggest series premiere. And where I wanted to start is, of course, you guys have had such prolific, careers. And often we hear when it's a new actor, like, I took this job because it was a great opportunity, or it's film acting, and so I want to wear another hat. But knowing the commitment that doing a TV series brings, because you guys have done quite a few, what went into the decision of doing this series and thinking about, like, this is the show that I want to put my all in for this extended period of time that I know it takes to make a TV series?
It's true, because the first time that I signed up to do a TV series, I remember sitting in a room with Shonda Rhimes before Scandal, and she was like, boy, if this show is a hit, you know, we could be on for 7 seasons. And I was like, that's never going to happen. So this time around, I was a little more careful at this point in my career. But when I read this script, I just loved this world. I loved these characters. I loved what the show was saying and what it was aiming toward. And I loved these relationships in the show. And I also loved the challenge of doing what we do, telling the truth, but in a different tone, you know, with a different approach. Tonally, I was really intrigued by that challenge, because I'm often weirdly, and I talk about this a lot in therapy, but drawn to things that scare me. And so there was enough fear of a challenge. Yeah. And then I begged him to do it.
Would you say that was true of you as well, Delroy, coming off of projects like The Good Fight, The Five Bloods?
The first thing I'd like to say is, how many actors in the room? And that may sound like
oh, there we go.
Hey.
Okay. I love you guys. Just really quickly, that you would be here on a Sunday suggests to me that you have that hunger and desire and thirst that we have. And I really admire, and obviously I have no idea what your journeys in Los Angeles has been, but I love you guys. And no matter where you are in your journeys, hang the hell in. And it's really easy for me to say that, but trust me, I've done a lot of hanging in a 40 plus year career. So just hang in, and thank you for coming, and we love you. To your question, Kerry, I got a letter from Kerry, and she made it really. She outlined what her aspirations are for this work. And so then we followed up with a Zoom call. And we all, when I say we, it was Kerry, myself, and Tracy McMillan, the writer. And during that Zoom call, we all shared personal pieces of ourselves, of our journey. And there was a certain simpatico, just as humans. And then when it came down to Kerry and Tracy describing to me what their aspirations were for the work, and there were some very specific things that resonated for me. And by the end of the Zoom, you know, I had it in my head that, yeah, I'd like to take this journey.
Another thing I wanted to bring up is both your TV work has been primarily more on the dramatic side of things, and we hear a lot about, comedy actors have an easier time going to drama. What is it like going from drama to comedy? What challenges arise from that?
It's the thing that's said, and it was just said to me last night. I was in an event last night, and the lady came over and she said, "My God, it's excuse me, it's wonderful to see Kerry and yourself doing comedy like this. I don't associate Kerry and yourself with doing comedy." And what I said was, it's become a little bit of a mantra, and that is that it is challenging, but the writing helps immeasurably. I know that's a kind of an obvious thing to say, but what I mean by that is, I think we both arrived at a place where we trust, or I'll speak for myself and let Kerry answer, but I trust that if I play the truth of the moment, that the comedy will come out of that.
Because life is funny, like, and these characters are inspired by people, Tracy and her dad. We're not imitating them or playing them, but we're playing characters deeply inspired by them. And they both have a lightness to them. They both are people who have figured out how to navigate the trauma of life by looking for the laughter often. And their relationship is rooted in a lot of joy and love, despite the challenges that they faced in you know, him being in and out of prison and her being in and out of foster care. They are people who look for the light. And so a lot of the lightness and joy in the tone is just out of searching for the truth of who they are and how they walk in this world. And the absurdity of family, like,
Absurdity.
Yeah,
Great.
right?
No, the absurdity and the I'm thinking about the scene. You guys saw the first two. Is that right? There's a later episode where excuse me, Paige is preparing to do a TED talk. And I genuinely want to help her. It's a genuine desire. And it just goes wrong.
Imagine that.
Now, that dynamic right there, and she gets like really mad at me, and it's kind of devastating. But in trying to repair that between us is the food. It's the stuff that creates, or it's an instance, it's an example of the stuff that is in the work that allows us to kind of go at it and find the humor, find the lightness, as you said, because it's like, we can't stay there, and you didn't understand me, and I was trying to, and she's saying, no. And there's another episode where she says, "Stop lying to me, you're lying." And she gets up and leaves, and we're outside, and I say, "Where you going?" And she says, "I'm going to get some air." And I said, "We're outside already." But
I think that's a little
it's
bit
hilarious.
It's so great. I think that's the writing, and that was written.
That's
right?
the writing.
And I think sometimes to me that's what healing. Hi. Sometimes to me that's what healing looks like. Like I think sometimes in life, when I can sit with my friends or my family members and laugh about the things that once made me cry, that's what healing looks like. So I think that's part of what we're doing in the show too. And I'm laughing about something now because now I see the absurdity of the tears. It doesn't mean I didn't mean them. Doesn't mean they weren't authentic, that they didn't come from an honest place. But there's also the absurdity of life and how we make things big and say ridiculous things when we're in moments of when we're distraught.
And we're also always trying to claw our way through it because we're trying to get to the other side of the whatever the situation is. And that's the activity, that's the
doing.
The doing.
Yeah, you hit on this earlier, but the show is inspired by creator Tracy Millen's life and her relationship with her dad. I was wondering, like, to what degree are you embodying Tracy and her father in Paige and Edwin? Is it conversations to get a feel for how they were? Or are you going directly from the script and kind of trying to maintain that separation between character and real person? I'm just wondering, like, in developing the character, how that went down.
I think I'll answer just for myself, but I think there's an alchemy to it. Like any character development, I love research. I love to nerd out on a character. I love to like get my hands on anything I can read and watch and go to museums that I think might inspire something. I always think of it as like building the dance floor so that when I get to set, I have something I can just dance on. I can take leaps from there, but I have to build a dance floor where I have a solid foundation of who the person is. And I never know exactly what the materials are that are going to firm up that floor. So some of that for me was Tracy. I watched every single Instagram post. I read her, because she does a lot of this relationship healing on Instagram. I read her memoir twice. I spent lots of time with her. But there are real differences between she and I. So I also wanted to figure out, what part of Paige is Kerry, what part of Paige is Tracy, and what part of Paige is Paige. And is like, it's the alchemy of kind of Kerry and Tracy and the research that all come together to create Paige. And really, we talked a lot about how Paige and Edwin are not Tracy and her dad, even though Tracy and her dad are these beautiful jumping off places and the inspiration. And so I never want to ignore the rich resource that Tracy and her life provide, but I also know that Paige is a different beast.
It was a point of departure. In the final analysis, we agreed from the outset that Tracy and her dad would be points of departure for the process, and we all understood that being the points of departure, we would be doing our research and hopefully arriving at creations that served everybody, served the stories, served Tracy, served Tracy's dad, and these new iterations of Paige and Edwin. And it's alchemy, great. It's a great word, and osmosis.
Yeah.
Right. It's grabbing all these various components and hoping that they all settle in at some point to serve as springboards, foundations for the journey, for the work.
And I mean, there's a beautiful book that I read called Somebody's Daughter. It's by Ashley C. Ford. It's also a memoir of a woman whose dad was in prison most of her life. That was a huge influence on me. Delroy spent a lot of time with formerly convicted folks, as well as spending some time with Tracy's dad. So we really did pull from lots of places.
And I always feel compelled to name them. So Tracy's dad, I spent time with him, who incredibly, the connective tissue for all of my research experiences, the generosity. I was afforded an incredible generosity by everybody that I came into contact with, starting with Tracy saying, yes, my dad will be with me in New York on such and such a date, and I was going to be in New York at the same time, so we got together.
Look at God.
Look at God. And then we talked on the phone, Harold and I, and then spent some more time. He was up in Northern California, which is where I live, and we got together then. Then there was an organization called Positive Direction Equal Change, an organization in San Francisco that works with formerly incarcerated folk They were incredibly generous. A young lady I'd met many years ago called named Ramona Massey put me in touch with them. Then there was the Social Living Network here in Los Angeles, which is a halfway house. I went and I spoke with the folk living there. Everybody was incredibly generous, telling their stories, sharing of themselves. And what that did for me was not only was it extraordinary just from human being to human being, giving me all this data, all this information, but it also increased my desire to want to get this right, to not F it up.
Yeah. You're invested in these
That's
folks.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
One thing, because it's a room full of actors, I want to share like some concrete ways that the research supports the work.
Yeah.
One way I was thinking about is, there's that scene where we're sitting in the car together and he says, I was always there for you. And I say like, yeah, if by there for me, you mean this call requires. Mm-hmm. So I had never heard one of those phone calls before. But in her memoir, Tracy describes it as like a robotic Barbie or something. There's some sort of reference she uses in the memoir that helped me understand what that voice was. And then I went on the internet and found recordings of different penitentiary recordings to figure out, what's the version of this woman's voice that I want to do in the car, right? And that's so important it's a line reading, but it's rooted in lived experience that I didn't have. Also in that scene, there's a line, I'm gonna tell you 2 moments that were improv'd, but they're not improv'd because they come from Tracy. So one is in the car when I say to him, you're lucky I didn't press 7. That wasn't in the script, but it was in her memoir. She talks about wanting to press 7, and 7 was, don't ever let this person call me again, right? 7 was how you block those calls. And so I didn't plan that line. I just had it in my body that of all the options the robotic voice says, that's one of them. And I threw it in one of the scenes, and we got in the edit and we were like, that works. Another example is when we were standing in the kitchen and he says, I love this moment when Delroy says, are you high? And when Edwin says, are you high? And I, again, because I've read Tracy's memoir, I knew that she dabbled in drugs, that she dabbled in heavy drugs, and that to me it was a miracle that she didn't become an addict, coming from where she came from and living the life of trauma that she had lived, being passed through dozens and dozens of foster homes. And so in that moment when he says, are you high? In a couple of takes, I said, by some miracle, I'm not, right? And so that's one of those moments where, again, it comes from this deeper commitment to understanding the history and the inner life of the character. And you never know when it's going to pop up in the work in ways that help you or that support the narrative. But it's just great to have that bag of truth about the character so that you can bring it forward whenever you need it or when it feels right.
I love that. Yeah, there we go. No, because the reason why I really love comedy is because it does kind of hit true to life. And you were talking about in survival, like being able to laugh at it. And I'm sure, like Delroy, when you were working with the incarcerated,
Formerly
incarcerated, excuse me. Like, yes, that is a part of developing a lived-in experience, but I'm sure a lot of comedy comes from that and sort of know how, like, this is a joke that they may say, just as you said, with Tracy, knowing that was in Tracy's memoir.
So I don't have an equivalent to what Kerry just said, but what I can say again, connective tissue. There were, I guess, 3 things. One is that with all of the narratives that were shared with me, there was never any self-pity, and always a really strong sense of, I'm gonna get through this. I gotta, and people shared with me some really intense experiences that they had gone through, but there was always I gotta figure this out. I'm gonna get through this. And that gave me, now that I'm thinking about it, sitting here this morning, this sense, and I was not conscious of this necessarily, but it gave me this sense of, for Edwin, for me, no matter what happens here, I'm gonna try to fix it.
Like a resilience.
Incredible resilience.
Yeah.
An incredible resilience. And there's something that's kind of tragic about that, particularly when it doesn't work. When I'm coming up against these obstacles, again, when we go down south, and I know you guys haven't seen that episode, but maybe some of you have. Okay. Coming in contact with that wall that the cat puts up in front of me, which creates this profound pain and even rage. I'm trying to get through this because I gotta support family, right? And that, again, I was not necessarily aware of this in the moment, but it comports with the dynamic that I got from all the cats that I met with and communicated with. No matter what their circumstances, no matter how seemingly dire, they had this desire to get through this thing, and that fed kind of directly into, I guess, what landed on me. One of the components that landed on me for Edwin.
Well, I have a question for you, because I feel like there was one. I've been wondering about this. I wondered if it came from spending time with Tracy's dad at all, because he was so elegant, as are you. But in that scene, I remember sitting in rehearsal in is the finale, or I think it's the finale or the penultimate, but where you, it's the finale, and you were sitting in the bedroom as a figment of my imagination, and you wasn't scripted. You said, "I need a teacup." And I was like, where did that come from? And it was so perfect. It's like that scene doesn't work without the teacup and the elegant way that you stir the teacup. And I thought, did that come from Tracy's dad a little bit? No, tell me.
Again. Well, no. But that's a really good example of it just came. I was not aware that it came from Tracy's dad per se, but for the actors in the room, right? You never want to play the obvious, and sometimes the real richness in the work comes from playing the opposite, right? So the answer is, I'm not sure where it came from, other than it felt right in the moment.
But that's when you know you've done all your homework to know your character so deeply that you know what's right and what's not.
Yes,
right.
That, and also going back to the very first conversation that the three of us had on the Zoom, and this was a key for me. One of the keys, Tracy said, if my dad walked into this room right now, you would never necessarily know that he had been incarcerated. That intrigued the hell out of me, because what that said to me was, you know how we all get labeled, right? And this man was not a label. He was a human being who happened to have been incarcerated a bunch of times. But he's a human being that had elegance, that had a profound humanity, that had humor, that had a lightness and a levity. So all of those things, again, by osmosis, I think when I met Harold, sometimes he went by Harold, sometimes he went by Will. So when I met him, and I was experiencing in real time various of those elements by osmosis, and it was I think dropping in that eventually produced that moment that just felt right.
So great
in the moment.
Before I get to audience questions, I have some right here. I do want to hit on the Negrescence episode, the 6th episode. Amazing work. You guys definitely have to watch that episode if you haven't already. And also such an example of like the absolute murderer's row of like writers and directors that you brought onto the show. Not only Tracy, who also worked on Mad Men, Yvette Lee Bowser, The Legend, Living Single, and all the Black sitcoms. And then Peter Saji did that episode, and he was on Blackish, co-created Mixed-ish. So you guys, I mean, so many great people that worked on this show. But yes, so audience questions for Kerry.
I'm going to say one thing about
Yes.
that. What you just said. And it was one of the things that initially attracted me to the work, but then actually manifested in the work, because it doesn't always happen like that. There was a very specific intention aesthetically that Kerry and Tracy said, we want to have certain people in the writer's room. We want to have certain, and it manifested. So I was not familiar per se with, I didn't know Yvette, I didn't know Peter, but they put their money where their mouths were, and they backed up what was being said with action. And that was a beautiful thing to be a part of, particularly given that, for creative workers of color, the fact that it is a little more difficult for us in the industry, and it is critical for us to be affirmed. And what Kerry's company represents, Tracy, we have done that in this work, and that's a beautiful thing for me to be a part of.
Okay. This question.
Okay, I just need to say something. I'm sorry. I just need to say something. Because there's that expression that people say all the time, don't meet your heroes. And this man is like the affirmation of what a lie that is, because there are people who not only live up to your dream of who they might be, but exceed expectation. And I mean, I'm not kidding that I literally on my knees prayed that he would say yes. And part of that is because I was from the age of 15 enamored with his work. The first time I remember being blown away by Delroy's performance was in the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it so transformed my idea of what the actor's responsibility was, what you could, for me, that he could be this same person at opposite extremes of a life experience, and that I believed that he was the same person, but in different decades and different times, at the top of his game and at the bottom of it, or at the end, a tragic end. It just, I was blown away. It really inspired me, and I've followed him ever since. And so I really, I felt like I knew that whoever was going to be in this role, that I wanted it to be someone who could make me better, and who I would want to come to work every day wanting to live up to the opportunity. So I'm so grateful that you said yes. And don't be afraid to meet your heroes.
Oh my God.
Don't be afraid to meet your
we
heroes.
have to get to the question, but I have to add something.
All good.
For all the actors, for all the creative workers in the room, no matter what your sphere. When I was starting out, I hadn't done anything years ago, and I was with a casting director, and there was nothing on my resume because I hadn't done anything, right? And she looked and she said, "Well, what do you want? 5, 10 years from now, what do you want for yourself? What do you want from your career?" And I hadn't done anything. Maybe 1 or 2 really tiny things. And I said to her, well, I just want to be respected for my work. And she kind of rolled her eyes. But 40 years later, and I get it from the world, fans, people who see the work. So the moral of the story is, for all of you creative workers in the room, never be afraid of speaking your truth. Manifest it, no matter what ridicule you may that may come at you. Speak your truth, live in your truth, because it's there for you. And it may take a minute, right? But live in your truth, and don't let anybody's ridicule of you or rejection of you. Live in your truth. Okay.
Okay, I think we got time for like one question.
Oh no, it's our fault because we kept talking.
No,
Did at least 2 questions.
First off, well, you hit on the research that you did, but I do want to shout out CW because they mentioned that their brother will be getting out of jail after 10 years and is coming to live with them. So this show really hits home. But this is for both of you. And it's from Melanie Kenny. How long does it? I'm reading from the hand. Don't worry, I got this. How long does it take to completely come out of the characters you play on screen? Do you ever use any of the character traits in your personal life? If so, have any of them made you a better person?
That's a great question.
I do feel like one of the gifts of being an actor is that whether you believe in it or not, we get to kind of experience a reincarnation in this life. Because I step into a character often at a pivotal moment in their life when they're learning or growing or experiencing something that's worth telling a story about. I get to be on that journey and gain the insights, like experience the insights, embody the new awarenesses that character goes through. And then I get to thank them and put them down, carry that lesson into my life, and go on and find another one. And so I do feel like I get really blessed by these characters. They do often make me better people. And sometimes I'm asking myself, like, sometimes I find that a character comes into my life to teach me something. Because often when I'm figuring out, when I'm doing the work to find the alchemy, when I'm trying to unlock the character, I'm asking myself, what does this character need from me? What is it that I'm needing to step into to bring truth and life to this character and this story? So I do find myself sometimes growing to meet the needs of a character, and then I get to carry that experience with me. But I do have little rituals to put them down, not just at the end of a project, even at the end of the day. Because, there's some, like, I didn't need to take Olivia Pope home to my infant. You know what I mean? Like, there's characters you don't need to take Broomhilda von Shaft back to the husband. Like, you gotta figure, for me, and so I have little rituals at the end of the day, and I have kind of more extensive rituals at the end of a project. And in TV, it's weird because it's sort of like, I've learned in TV to not put her down completely. It's like, I'm gonna see you hopefully in a few months, but you got to give me my Kerry back now. But hopefully, Hulu, I'm gonna see you in a few months. Yeah.
This is where the aspect of putting a character down, if aspects of the character the one is playing follow you into your life, this is where the craft of acting comes in, and being trained, and if there are any untrained actors, this is not an aspersion on anybody, but one of the importance of being a trained actor and addressing the journey as a craft is in having the ability to know the difference, right? Now, having said that, the film I did many years ago called Clockers, and I'm playing Rodney. And, Rodney was very different than myself. First of all, had I even tried to take Rodney home, the wife wasn't having it. But because I was aware that he was so different, there was a demarcation between Rodney and myself, and I'm clear about that. And while parts of Rodney followed me from the standpoint that one didn't just drop Rodney, but I was very clear, the work and my life. And part of that came from having an understanding of the craft and my training as an actor. One other example, I got to play Satchel Paige, y'all, in a film for television called Soul of the Game, and I read a lot about. I was scared. I was really scared of playing Satchel. I was born in England. I don't play baseball. I'm a soccer guy, right? I never pitched, so they got me a pitching coach, all of that. But from reading about Satchel, I learned, and I read a lot of stuff about Satchel Paige, and I came to this realization that Satchel Paige used humor to negotiate his pain, which is the exact opposite from me. Now, have I been able to take that into my life? I wish I could take that more. But it was something that I identified, and it was a gift that Satchel gave me, so that while I was playing that character on that journey, I got to be him with some levity, with some lightness, and that was a gift that Satchel gave me. And there are other instances, but they're the two that came to mind.
Also, in terms of what you said, like I want to say for me, the training doesn't end. So when we talk about being a trained actor and having craft, a sense of craft, if you're sitting here and thinking, I don't have that, it's never too late to have that. I still work with coaches. I still train that the training is ongoing. I often think like we are, you sit at a piano and you tune a piano. Well, we are our instrument as actors. We're the instrument. So for me, that's a combination of, doing the work in therapy to understand who am I now so that I know the difference between the character and me. I got to know me. But also that training, like making sure my toolbox is sharp. One of the things about doing a comedy, although I do think we're approaching the work like we do anything else, but I am noticing like, oh, there's some interesting different tools in my toolbox right now from doing this, 8 episodes of this show. That's interesting. And it's important for me to keep updating my toolbox, I think.
And from the standpoint of updating and learning and continuing to learn, the various press events that Kerry and I have done together, I'm learning about her as an actor each time. When, for instance, Kerry, all right. Okay.
What are you learning? Like what?
When Kerry talked about the dance floor that she was building, right, and she's giving all of us a kind of a way into the way that she works as an actor, and that's illuminating for me, because I'm never. Look, I'll say this about Kerry Washington. Fine actor, fine business person, fine as a woman.
You're not too shabby yourself.
And the ability to meld all of those things and manifest those things in service of work, in service of business, is a brilliant thing. Specifically with regard to Kerry as an actor, I'm learning all the time, and hopefully Hulu, if and when we do a second season, then all of that will be taken into the work. I said to Kerry, and I know we're talking, and you're really nervous, but I said to Kerry a few weeks ago, we were talking about maybe there'll be a second season or not, and I said, I'm scared. I'm kind of scared about a second season. And Kerry understood what I was saying, because she's an actor too, and we're on a certain plane. When I say I'm scared, I'm not like quaking in my boots, but the bar has been set pretty high, right? From the standpoint of how audiences have embraced us and responded to the work. So if and when there is a second season, we really got to come with it.
There we go. Come on.
Right?
Let Hulu hear how much you want a second season. Come on. There we go. There we go.
But listen, I'll tell you, in gratitude to everything you're saying, that what matters is the numbers. I'll sit up here to put my producing hat on for a second.
Right.
The most important thing that you could do today would be to call every friend you have who hasn't watched yet and tell them to watch, any family member, and not to watch on your account, to watch on a different account. Although if it's on your account, it's a rewatch. That still counts. But it would be great if it was a different account. And that matters. Those numbers actually matter. It's like, what we watch is how we vote for content. And so if we want these stories, this story in particular, but also just stories about marginalized folks, we have to tune in and turn up and support it with our eyeballs. So we feel it. I mean, the fact that you're here today, we couldn't be more grateful. It's so amazing to see this room packed full of actors and humans, and we really do have so much gratitude and love for you. And yes, and thank you for watching. If you haven't watched all of it, do. If you know anybody who hasn't watched, have them watch, because Hulu's just looking at those numbers. We are in a data-driven universe right now.
Well, we also need to thank you, Kerry, Delroy, not only for answering questions about UnPrisoned, but dropping so much knowledge. And I know you guys have to go, but thanks again.
Thank you. What a great job you did, right? Give it up.